Propaganda can be found everywhere. It can be found in news, in advertising, even in entertainment, and of course on social media and on WhatsApp. So how do we identify propaganda? That's the question on Media Buddhi today. Hi, I'm HR Venkatesh. The thing with propaganda though is it's as old as information itself. For example, the Arthashastra is an old treatise on how to use propaganda as a tool for states and countries. Another thing about propaganda is that it can be used for both good and bad purposes. Here are some examples of propaganda used for good purposes. For the feminist movement, this poster. Another poster calling for women to join the workforce. Family planning posters. And many such examples like this. In contemporary times though, when we use the word propaganda, we use it to mean something negative, something that is used to divide people, not unite them. Now, one thing I think we can all agree on is that propaganda can only be created successfully by very powerful entities such as governments and political parties, also a few mass movements. And why do I say that? Because for propaganda to be really effective, the same message has to be recycled and reinforced countless numbers of times. And also it has to reach millions of people. And the only people who are powerful enough to do that are these big governments and big political parties. Also big companies. We should not ignore that. That's why propaganda is a tool used by governments, parties, and big corporations. Now, what are the common characteristics of propaganda? I've been able to identify 6 of them, and I've taken them from here and there, but also from the Media Education Lab. 1. Propaganda is any information that appeals to our insecurities and our anxieties. So it hits us where we feel our emotions. 2. It is designed with a clear purpose to get us to act in an emotional manner. So the first 2 instances, it appeals to our emotions, it makes us then act in an emotional manner. Number 3, propaganda is indifferent to the truth sometimes. It means it uses pretty much anything, lies for example, to accomplish what it wants to do. Number 4, the characteristic of propaganda is it uses almost any means to accomplish its ends, which means it's not fussy about the route that propaganda takes. The 5th characteristic of propaganda is that it not only tries to influence our attitudes, but also our behavior on an individual level. So it activates emotions that make us not just think differently, but want to do things differently or want to do certain specific things. And number 6, related to that, is propaganda seeks to influence not just individuals, but mass populations. That's why propaganda, especially negative propaganda, is so powerful because it can use lies, it can use any means to accomplish its ends. It appeals to our anxieties and insecurities. Easy then to use propaganda for hate. Okay, now here's an example that I'm going to use to illustrate what I mean. I received this image on WhatsApp a few months ago. It's a poster, and at first glance, it is celebrating the armed forces, and for most people, this is a positive message. However, if you look closely, you'll see some things. The text says right on top, today in 1965, the Indian Army reached Lahore. Then in smaller text, there are 2 sentences. The first says, the army halted outside Lahore awaiting further orders from the government. And then it says, unfortunately, a ceasefire was signed 3 days later. Now in large type below, as you can see, and I'm seeing it right now, it says, had they been allowed to advance, history would have been different today. So what is this? Is this propaganda or is it not? Well, to begin with, it is designed to arouse a mix of emotions. Pride, for example, we Indians, we tend to be very proud of our armed forces. But it also arouses other emotions, indignation, anger, hatred, even fear. For Indians, it arouses complex emotions regarding Pakistan and by extension Muslims. And not just Muslims in Pakistan, but feelings about Muslims in India, which of course influences not just our attitudes but also behavior. Now notice this last line again. Look at it carefully. This is not a fact. It is pure speculation. And it brings up a question that can only be answered by an individual. What do I mean by that? I mean, each of us is bound to have a slightly different response when we look at this image. Yes, it does arouse consistent emotions. They're all very, very similar, these emotions, but for each person it will be slightly different. For some people, hatred is the primary emotion. For some people, it's anger. For some people, it's fear or anxiety, maybe because one of their family members is with the armed forces. But it can also be used to mobilize people at a mass level. No wonder then that this image has been so viral. This image satisfies some of the key components of propaganda. It appeals to our insecurities and anxieties. It makes us respond emotionally. It is indifferent to the truth. There's so much speculation there. On its own, this image cannot mobilize our behavior, but used in combination with a number of other images, thousands of them, images, videos, text, speeches, so on and so forth, on a daily and hourly basis, it is very, very powerful. Interestingly, there is a small logo on this image that says Nation with Namo. Namo referring, of course, to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I would say that Modi's supporters, for them, this is very effective. But for people who don't support Modi, even if they love the armed forces, this is probably not going to be that effective. As propaganda, in the end though, this poster is very effective. If they'd removed Nation with Namo, who knows, it might have been even more effective. Anyway, the purpose of this video is to get you thinking. There is propaganda literally everywhere. It's embedded in so much that we consume on a daily basis. Most of it is actually even more subtle than the example that I just showed. This example is really not so subtle after all. So next time you're reading the news or watching a movie or looking at an ad or reading a text on a WhatsApp group, think about propaganda and who benefits from such a message. That's all for now, but thanks for watching and we'll see you next week.